Hi friends, I just wanted to pop on today and answer the question, how do I use stamps in my Bible? So this is just a basic instruction about inks and stamps and a few extra tips. And it's from my book, which I'll link in the description, but this is where we are. We have a lot more to teach through, obviously, but this is available if you'd like it. So first, I want to show you some examples out of my own Bible. So how I use stamps in the Bible, I honestly am very picky about my stamps. I have to really love them, or they have to have multiple purposes. And so that's kind of, the two factors that I consider when I'm purchasing stamps. I don't use them a lot, and so I don't purchase a lot of them. I don't worry about all the storage and all that stuff. Some people love stamps, and that's awesome. Very creative ways to use stamps, and I'll get into some of that down the road, but that's not me. I tend to either do my own artwork or make things a little bit more simpler. So for starters, here is one that it's just a little tiny butterfly stamp or a little heart stamp, but I created basically a little world out of them. And it's a very simple way to use them. This is also a stamp. It's one whole block of text. And let's see, here's another one where it's a text stamp. I love the script on this one. And I believe I stamped this, but then I kind of went over it again with markers, colors, something or other. Okay. And then here's another one. I believe, this is half of a stamp, and that's another piece of the stamp. Either that, or I may have, I think this is a piece of a stamp. So you can basically put two of them together and extend it. And this is just like a color pencil or watercolor pencil. So if you're not comfortable with your own drawings, then this is a really good way to get started. And as you grow in your own ability to create, then maybe you'll find that you don't need these quite so much, or maybe you'll use them as a basis, but then create a whole scene, around them. So just some thoughts. Let's dive into this. Okay, so let's talk inks. There are a couple different kinds of inks. You can have a permanent ink, a dye-based ink. That would be like, these are permanent. This one is more, this one is a dye ink for sure. And so these are going to possibly bleed through your pages, but they will not run when you get them wet. So if you wanted to stamp something and then color it with a watercolor or a marker of some sort, your lines that you stamped are not going to bleed. Okay. And then you have other options like this one. I don't even know if they have these anymore. This is a pigment ink, or you might use a chalk ink. I don't have a chalk ink, but I'll show you how to use a chalk marker, and it will work like a chalk ink. And so you don't always have to have a stamp pad. You can actually use something like a marker or watercolor paints. So I'll show you how to do that. But these are going to be safe on your paper. They won't bleed through, but the issue with them is if you plan on using like a watercolor or a marker over the top of them, they will bleed. Your lines from the stamp will bleed. Okay, so I've labeled these. So let's see, we have this Ranger pigment ink pad, which states that it's permanent and waterproof. So let's try this. So here's just an old stamp that I have. When you're inking these and when you're done, so in order to keep this clean, in order to keep the rubber from deteriorating, you want to clean these right away. So I keep just a washcloth, a wet washcloth, or you could use baby white, wet paper towel, kind of keep it on the side to be able to wash these right away and get as much of this ink off as you can, because that ink over time will deteriorate your stamp. So that's just a tip. And so I've done that. I've got that off to the side. Okay, and then I've got a Ranger Distress ink. This is just a little tiny one, so I'm going to actually apply this a little bit differently. I'm going to do this instead. Okay. And even though I wanted to do this on a back page that is more like a test page, my test pages are like, they don't have very many empty pages in the back for doing that in this Bible. So I am in Revelation. Okay, stampability. So this is one that I got from Hobby Lobby. It says that it is a die. So we'll try this. And after I'm done stamping all of these, we'll flip the page to see which ones have bled through. Okay, this is the Studio Die ink. Now, in this case, I know this one will bleed through. And I'll link the video that discusses like how to avoid that, how to protect your pages. So there's that one and this illustrated pigment. Okay, so again, I don't know that they have pigments, but there are lots of companies out there who create pigments, different stamp sets or ink sets. So you can get these pretty much in any big box store. I'm just trying to explain the differences and how you would use them in different ways. Okay, so here is the chalk marker, and here's how you would use this. Just kind of lay it on its side. So you can see how the ink is, attaching itself to the stamp. And of course, it's drying a little bit as it's taking longer for this to be applied. And so in order to re-moisten this ink, you just want to breathe on it. And the moisture in your breath will give it just enough to be able to re-wet it. So I'm going to put that one here. Okay. So those are the different ones. This one's a chalk marker. Now you can do that sort of thing and with other markers, experiment. Like you can experiment in the back of your Bible just like we're doing here. So, okay, here's the bleed through test, right? Out of all of those, the one that really bled through was this die ink. So just so you know, you can do this sort of test with your own stamps, but this is a really good indication of how the bleed through is. So there's one more thing we want to do. We want to do a bleeding test. So if you were to happen to get these wet, which ones are going to bleed your lines? So in order to see whether these lines bleed or not, I just have a simple watercolor brush, and we're just going to drop some water on these. So I have to get it wet. There we go. Okay, so this one looks like it is permanent. It's basically waterproof, and it does or does not bleed through. It does not bleed through. Okay, here's the Ranger Distress ink. This one is bleeding somewhat. You're starting to get a bit of a brown, a little light tan shadow. So this is doing some bleeding, but it's not horrible. Now on the back side, you're starting to see that it has bled through the page. So that's the Ranger Distress inks. Let's try the Stampabilities ink pad. This one also is starting to show a bit of a dye spread. So this one is not completely dye proof, but it's not horrible. And it does not seem to be bleeding through. There's a bit of a shadow, but it doesn't seem to be bleeding through the back of the page. This dye ink actually is bleeding as well, you can see. And of course, we already know that it bleeds through the page. Here's another pigment ink. This one is bleeding somewhat, not horribly, but a little, but it's not bleeding through the page. And then the last is this chalk marker. And you can see you're really losing your lines on that one. So depending on how you want to illustrate and color in your designs for your stamps, these are kind of the things that you have to factor into what kind of tools you're going to use in choosing your inks. Here's a quick tip for you. You would want to store your ink pads upside down. You can put a color or, you know, a copy of the color on the bottom of it just as reference. But when you store them upside down, the ink sinks to what would be the top of the pad, so that when you go to use it, your ink is up on the top rather than on the bottom. So just a little tip. All right, let's talk about stamps. So this set is a ginormous classroom set, and we found it in my grandparents' house when we were cleaning it out after they'd passed away. And so I love these. These are, you know, it says, let me see. So here's an elephant. It's great, right? There's your photo or your picture stamp, and here's your word stamp. If anybody remembers, if you're old enough to remember, you know, you had like these blue ink pads that came with these stamp sets when you were little. But I just love this stamp set. It's ginormous and really cumbersome, and I don't know where to store it, but I just can't seem to get rid of it because it's just adorable. And it's got things like, let's see what this is, like the shepherd, you know. So again, I just can't seem to get rid of it. So these are an example of rubber stamps. So we have rubber stamps. Now, I think everybody knows these. These are more vintage, another vintage, this red rubber stamp. You can actually buy the rubber and create your own stamps, or is it linographing? Something like that. And so these are some that I have. I don't have very many, but I do have a few that I like and I don't want to get rid of. So this is one choice for stamps, your rubber stamps. And what I buy more of these days are the clear stamps. So that would be these, and you use them with clear blocks. So here's a clear block with a stamp on it. The nice thing about these acrylic blocks, and they come in different sizes. So there's an example of one. They come in different sizes. If you ink up your photo or your stamp, ink up your stamp, and it doesn't really show very well on your paper, you can always do it again. Because it's clear, you can get an exact placement. Whereas if you try to go over a stamp again, and you can't, you're going in blind using these wooden blocks. So that's why I've kind of moved to the acrylic ones. And I don't know if the stamps are made out of a silicone or some other sort of material, but these are just nicer to use overall. So that's the second set of stamps, okay? And then this is not necessarily a stamp. This is a texture board. It is made out of some sort of rubber or plastic rubber combination, because it is flexible. It is meant for like clay. So in the store, I found these in the polymer clay areas, but you can also use them like a stamp and just use them with an ink pad and get your texture on your background paper. So I found these, just something for you to consider. So technically you could maybe use these. So those are different types of stamps that you can use. Here's how I choose stamps, because I don't just go out and buy whatever. I choose them with a lot of purpose. So like for this one, we're talking about journeys. So throughout the Bible, whether you're talking Adam or Abraham or the new Christians, you know, they're all on journeys. You and I are on a journey. And so I can see using this for different purposes in my Bible or my Bible journaling. This one, again, has more textures to it. There is some greenery here. I like the randomness of it. This one, again, is textures. I love vintage stuff. And so this, again, these make great background, you know, elements of your page. The rainbow you can use, well, of course, in Genesis when God's talking about why he's creating the rainbow, but you can also use it for other parts of your Bible, just in bringing some sort of joy to your pages. You know, something like this, you can, you know, put whatever you want inside of here. You might have florals, you might have bubbles, you might have marbles, water, whatever you want. So I usually try to choose things with multiple purposes or that are just beautiful overall. Florals like this floral here. I've used these so much that they won't even stick to the plastic backing anymore, and so I just pop them all without the plastic into one of these gum containers. So I have a few of these here. The gum containers are also good for storing the 3x4 stamps. Some of my stamps, like these, I pop these into like a pencil pocket, you know, that you can store in a binder. These I just keep in here. Oh, and the other kind of stamps that I choose would be alphabet stamps. Now you don't need to go overboard on these. You just choose something. There's a large, a medium, a small stamp, and then I do have another one that's actually a bigger stamp on a smaller package. So if you have a few different versions of alphabet stamps, you can do pretty much any sort of wording that you would like to do. Okay, and then the other thing, that the other version of stamps I like are word stamps, and I'm picky about these too because I don't want, you know, you can get all kinds of inspirational quotes on your stamps, but that doesn't mean they're faith-filled, and so I tend to choose ones that are more faith-filled. One other stamp that I forgot to mention is a date stamp. So this is one that's just an automatic, just smash it and it goes. You change it according to, you know, the date here. And I've been out of town, out of the state actually, and so I've not been using it lately, but adjust it here and just smack it. So a date stamp is very helpful too.